The final week of Ethan's stay arrived faster than Laura could have imagined. The house felt simultaneously full and empty. Full with the energy he brought and empty with the looming thought of his departure. Each day became precious, each shared conversation or quiet moment more significant. Laura tried to savor every laugh, every detail of their routine, and every small interaction that had grown into a comforting rhythm over the past few weeks. She realized she had been living without this type of connection for far too long. Ethan had grown comfortable in the house, naturally taking on roles that made the household flow more smoothly. He would help Daniel with small repairs, organize groceries, and even make morning coffee without being asked. Laura watched him with pride and admiration, noticing how thoughtful and mature he had become over the past few weeks. She also noticed how her own confidence had returned. She moved with ease around the house, laughed more freely, and even started planning small projects for herself again. These changes were subtle but profound, making her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. One evening, thunderstorm rolled in suddenly, rattling windows and casting shadows through the house. Power flickered and went out, leaving only the dim light of candles flickering across the walls. Laura and Ethan found themselves in the living room, sitting close together, sharing a blanket for warmth. They spoke softly, reflecting on the days they had spent together, their shared memories, and the simple joys that had filled the house with energy again. The conversation was comforting and grounding, a safe place amid the storm outside. "You've changed this house, Aunt Laura," Ethan said quietly, his voice almost reverent. "It's brighter, happier, and I think I've learned a lot from seeing how you handle everything." Laura smiled, feeling a lump in her throat. She appreciated his words deeply, not as a romantic gesture, but as a recognition of her worth and resilience. For years, she had felt invisible in her own life, overshadowed by routines and responsibilities. Ethan's presence had reminded her of her own vitality, her capacity to care, to connect, and to bring joy to the people around her. The storm passed, leaving a quiet stillness in the house. Laura noticed that the brief darkness had somehow made the light in the room feel warmer. The bond between her and Ethan stronger. She realized that the past weeks had allowed her to rediscover herself. She had laughed, played, shared, and even worried, and through it all, she had found a deep sense of connection that was both innocent and profoundly meaningful. The day of Ethan's departure came sooner than either of them expected. Laura woke early to prepare breakfast, trying not to let the moment overwhelm her. She set the table carefully, making his favorite dishes, and placed a small note beside his plate. "Thank you for bringing joy back into this house. We will always remember these days." Ethan entered quietly, noticing the note, and smiled softly, a mix of gratitude and nostalgia in his eyes. During breakfast, their conversation was lighthearted at first, discussing what he planned to do once back at college. But beneath the casual tone lay a layer of unspoken emotion, the realization that their daily interactions were about to change, that the household would return to its previous quietness, and that the warmth they had shared would be missing. Laura found herself holding back tears, trying to keep the morning bright and easy for him. After breakfast, they moved to the front door. Ethan picked up his bag and they exchanged a long, meaningful look. There were no inappropriate gestures, no misunderstanding, only a deep acknowledgement of what the past weeks had meant for both of them. "I'll miss this," Ethan said softly. "I'll miss how you made me feel, like I belonged." Laura's heart swelled with a mix of happiness and sadness. She nodded, finding it hard to speak through the lump in her throat. "We'll always have these memories," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "You've brought something into this house that I'll never forget." Ethan hugged her briefly, a comforting and familial embrace that spoke volumes about the bond they had formed. It was warm, reassuring, and completely appropriate. Yet it carried the weight of everything unspoken: gratitude, connection, growth, and mutual understanding. When Ethan left, the house suddenly felt quiet, almost hollow. Laura walked through the rooms, noticing the absence of his presence in ways that surprised her. The kitchen no longer smelled of coffee brewing early in the morning. The living room felt emptier without his laughter. and even the garden seemed to lack the energy he had brought to it. She realized that she had grown accustomed to his presence, to the small, meaningful ways he had filled her days with warmth and companionship. Daniel returned home later that evening, unaware of the emotional shift that had occurred in the household. He was tired, preoccupied, and focused solely on his own routines. Laura felt a pang of realization, while her marriage remained functional. Her emotional needs had been largely unmet for years. Ethan had reminded her of the depth of connection she had been missing, and she resolved to carry that awareness forward into her life in the days that followed. Laura slowly reestablished the household routines. She continued painting, gardening, and playing music, activities she had rediscovered thanks to Ethan's presence. She called friends she hadn't spoken to in months, reconnecting with her social life and sharing stories of the small joys she had experienced. Each action, each choice, was infused with the vitality and appreciation that had grown within her during Ethan's stay. Laura also reflected deeply on her marriage. She realized that connection, attention, and emotional intimacy were essential components of her happiness. While Daniel remained largely unaware of what had been missing, she understood that she could no longer suppress her own needs. Ethan had shown her that fulfillment could come in unexpected ways, and that self-awareness and emotional care were vital to her well-being. One afternoon, Laura received a message from Ethan, thanking her again for everything and sharing a few updates from his first week back at college. She responded warmly, grateful for the ongoing connection despite the physical distance. She realized that bonds didn't need to be constant or physical to have a profound impact. The memories, conversations, and shared experiences could continue to nurture her heart and spirit over time. Laura embraced her newfound sense of independence and self-worth. She took up new hobbies, strengthened her friendships, and became more attentive to the small joys in life. She had learned that happiness could emerge in subtle, unexpected ways, often through the kindness, understanding, and companionship of others. Ethan had been a catalyst for this transformation, but the lasting change belonged to her, the awareness that she could create a life rich in connection, warmth, and fulfillment. Looking back, Laura understood that the past weeks had been a turning point. Her life had shifted not because of drama or conflict, but because of the quiet, meaningful interactions that reminded her of her own vitality. She felt gratitude for Ethan's presence, for his empathy, his thoughtfulness, and the way he had reawakened a sense of life in her heart. In the end, Laura realized that love and connection could take many forms, not all of them romantic. Not all of them constant, but all of them meaningful. Ethan had come into her life unexpectedly, filled it with light, and left it with lasting warmth. She was forever changed, not by scandal or drama, but by the simple, profound power of human connection, kindness, and emotional presence. The house no longer felt hollow. It was quieter, yes, but it also carried a subtle, lingering energy, a reminder that life could be vibrant even in moments of absence, and that the bonds we form, however temporary, could leave lasting imprints on our hearts. Laura smiled, knowing she had emerged from this experience stronger, more aware, and more open to the joys life could bring. She felt ready for the future, ready to nurture connections, and ready to embrace every meaningful moment that came her way. And so, life continued, enriched by the quiet but powerful lessons of connection, understanding, and the unexpected presence of someone who reminded Laura of what it truly meant to feel alive. Margaret Collins was 59 and lived alone in a small white-painted house on the edge of Portland, Oregon. Her days passed quietly, marked by routines that no longer brought joy: morning coffee, feeding the cat, flipping through TV channels she barely watched. 2 years had passed since her husband Greg died, but the house still echoed with his absence. The smell of his books, the chair he used to sit in, the sound of his laugh, she could almost still hear it, was all there, but faint, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. She didn't complain. She'd built her life around peaceful habits, tending her garden, reading novels, and ordering little things online that made her feel like someone was still thinking of her. That morning was the same as any other. The autumn air outside carried the scent of wet leaves. and the soft light through the window made everything in her kitchen look golden. She had ordered new curtains the week before. Okay. And she expected them to arrive that day. The doorbell rang while she was stirring her tea. It startled her a bit. She wasn't used to visitors. She put down her cup and opened the door. Standing there was a young man, tall, lean, and smiling, holding a large box. His delivery uniform was slightly wrinkled, and his name tag read, Eli. His hair was messy in a casual way, like someone who didn't try too hard but somehow looked good anyway. His eyes were bright and kind, and his voice had the warmth of someone who liked people. Delivery for Margaret Collins, he said, shifting the box slightly. She nodded. Yes, that's me. You can just leave it there. Thank you. It's kind of heavy, he replied, smiling. I can bring it inside if you'd like. She hesitated. She wasn't used to letting strangers in. But his tone was respectful, not pushy, and for some reason she said yes. All right? That would be nice of you. He stepped inside carefully, setting the box near the living room couch. As he straightened up, he noticed the old photographs on the wall. Is that you and your husband? He asked. She nodded. That was Greg. He passed a couple of years ago. Sorry to hear that, Eli said softly. You too look happy. Margaret smiled faintly. We were. There was a pause, not uncomfortable, just quiet. Then he noticed her bookshelf full of classic novels. You must love reading, he said. She chuckled. Old habit. I used to teach English literature. That's cool, he said. I'm actually studying photography at the community college. Delivering packages helps me pay for classes. She noticed the small tattoo on his wrist and old-style camera drawn in fine lines. Ah, so that explains it, she said with a smile. He looked a little embarrassed. Yeah, my mom says it's a reminder to keep chasing what I love, even when life gets hard. Margaret felt a small tug in her chest. She used to say the same thing to her students. The room suddenly felt warmer, more alive than it had in months. When he left, she stood by the window and watched his van drive away, its energy lingering in the air like a pleasant memory. She laughed quietly to herself. How strange it was that a stranger's kindness could lift the weight she'd been carrying for so long. That night, she caught herself thinking about the brief encounter while she read. She wasn't thinking of Eli romantically. It was something simpler, more human, a reminder that connections still existed, that maybe her story wasn't over yet. The next week, she ordered a few household things, dish towels, a small lamp, a book she didn't really need. The deliveries kept coming, and so did Eli. Each time their conversations grew longer. He told her about his photography class, about how he wanted to capture real people in his photos, not models. She told him about her teaching days, about how she missed watching her students discover stories that made them feel alive one day. When he came by with another package, he looked at her garden through the window. Your flowers are amazing, he said. They look like something out of a painting. She smiled, proud. Gardening keeps me sane, she admitted. Would you ever let me take photos here? He asked suddenly. For my project. It's called Hidden Beauty, about finding stories in everyday places. Your garden would be perfect. Margaret blinked, surprised. You really think so? He nodded, definitely. It feels peaceful but alive at the same time. That's rare. She hesitated. No one had called anything about her life beautiful in a long time. All right, she said finally, but only if you promise not to make me look old. Eli laughed. That's impossible. She didn't know if he meant she looked young or if he was just being kind, but either way. The words warmed her. He came by that weekend with his camera. It was a mild afternoon, the kind that smelled of earth and fading sunlight. The garden was in full bloom, roses, lavender. Marigolds all glowing in soft gold light. Just act natural, he said, setting up his camera. You don't have to pose, just be you. Margaret felt awkward at first. She wasn't used to being the subject of anyone's attention, let alone a young man's camera. But Eli had an easy way about him. He talked while he worked, making her laugh about his photography mishaps. Like the time he accidentally deleted an entire memory card or fell into a pond trying to capture a reflection. Little by little, her self-consciousness faded. He took photos of her watering plants, arranging flowers, and sitting on the wooden bench under the maple tree. The afternoon light danced around her, softening the lines on her face, turning silver hair into something radiant. When he finally showed her the photos on his camera screen, she gasped. "Is that me?" she whispered. Eiley smiled. "Yes, that's you." She stared at the image herself framed by sunlight, her eyes gentle but full of something she hadn't seen in years. It wasn't vanity. It was recognition. The woman in the photo looked alive, peaceful, almost happy. "I don't remember looking like that," she said softly. "You always did," Eli said simply. "You just forgot." His words struck deep. For a moment, she couldn't speak. It wasn't about age or beauty. It was about seeing herself again. After he left, Margaret sat in the garden alone, holding a cup of tea. She thought about how strange life was. How a young stranger could walk into her quiet world and remind her of something she thought she'd lost. That night, she opened her email and found the photos he'd sent. Each one told a small story. Her laughter caught midair, her hands brushing against the petals, her eyes lost in thought. She stared at them for a long time, feeling something shift inside her. She felt seen. Not as a widow, not as an aging woman, but as someone still capable of meaning, still worth noticing. She didn't know where this new feeling would lead. Maybe it was just the beginning of a friendship, or maybe it was something deeper, chance to feel alive again. But she knew one thing for certain. The world outside her door suddenly seemed a little less quiet. The next morning, she found herself smiling as she baked muffins, something she hadn't done in months. She packed a few into a small box, thinking maybe she'd give them to Eli the next time he came by. For the first time in a long while, Margaret had something to look forward to, and as she looked out at her garden, golden with sunlight, she whispered, "Thank you. Greg, maybe you sent him." Little did she know, that small act of kindness offering muffins to a delivery boy would lead her into an emotional journey she never expected. Because sometimes, life gives you one more chance to rediscover who you are, even when you think your story is already written. The days after the garden photo session became a small rhythm in Margaret Collins' life. Each morning she found herself glancing at the driveway, hoping to hear the familiar hum of Eli's delivery van. It was not the kind of longing she had once known for romance, but something subtler, more humana, craving for connection, for laughter. For the small spark of life she had almost forgotten, Eli continued his deliveries. And every visit seemed to bring something new. Sometimes it was a story from college, sometimes a question about a novel she'd loved. Other times it was a brief moment of quiet where the two of them just sat talking about nothing at all. Margaret noticed that she felt lighter after these visits, like a weight had been lifted from her chest. One afternoon, a package arrived with an unusually large box. She opened the door and found Eli holding it with a grin. "I think this one's going to need your approval," he said. Curious, she invited him inside. As he carefully carried the box into the living room, she caught sight of the label. Lit was an assortment of photography prints he had made from his recent projects. "I thought maybe you'd like to see them," Eli said. "You've given me some inspiration." Margaret's eyes softened as she looked through the prints. They weren't just pictures, they were stories frozen in time. Some were of city streets bustling with life. Others were quiet landscapes, just like her garden. And in every frame, she saw a perspective she hadn't noticed before. A quiet beauty in the mundane. "You have a real gift," she said softly. Eli shrugged modestly. "I'm learning. I just want to capture things people overlook." Margaret nodded. She understood that feeling all too well. Life often rushed by, and most people missed the small moments that mattered. She realized that, in a way, Eli reminded her of Greg, not in looks or mannerisms, but in his attention to detail, his ability to notice what others ignored, and his quiet passion for life. The afternoon stretched on. Eli talked about a project he was planning, photographing older women who had stories to tell, capturing their strength and grace. Margaret felt a pang of curiosity and pride. Could he really be interested in her for a project like that? Could someone see her not as an aging widow, but as a person with a history, with depth, with life still burning quietly inside? You know, she said slowly, I never thought anyone would want to photograph me like that. You've got stories, Eli replied, looking directly at her. And I want to show them. It's not about age, it's about life. Margaret felt her heart skip a beat. His words were innocent, yet they stirred something deep inside her. It wasn't desire in the conventional sense, it was recognition, validation, a reminder that she still mattered. Over the next few weeks, the visits became more frequent, each one leaving Margaret a little lighter, a little happier. Eli asked about her life, her memories, her books, her garden. She found herself opening up in ways she hadn't for years. She laughed at his jokes, shared small secrets about her youth, and even admitted the little fears she'd held close since Greg's death. One rainy afternoon, Eli arrived with his camera slung over his shoulder and a new sparkle in his eyes. I've been working on a project about light in unexpected places, he explained. I thought we could try it in your living room today. Margaret hesitated, but something about his enthusiasm was contagious. She helped him arrange chairs and props, and soon the room was filled with the soft glow of lamps and reflections from raindrops outside. The photo session was playful. They laughed at awkward poses, fumbled with props, and experimented with angles. By the end of the afternoon, Margaret realized she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years. Eli's youthful energy, his genuine curiosity, and his respect for her made her heart feel lighter. She wasn't embarrassed by her age or her loneliness. She felt seen, appreciated, human. After he left, she sat by the window with a cup of tea, looking at the rain falling softly on the garden. She thought about how strange life was, how someone she barely knew could make her feel this way. It wasn't infidelity in any conventional sense. It wasn't betrayal. It was a rekindling of her own sense of self, a reminder that life still held surprises and small joys. Even after loss, Margaret began to anticipate his visits. Not in a way that made her anxious, but in a gentle, pleasant way. She found herself tidying the house more, baking cookies for no reason, and even planting a few extra flowers in the garden, hoping they would catch his eye. Each time he arrived, the day seemed brighter. One evening, after Eli had left with another batch of photographs, Margaret sat alone with her thoughts. She realized that her feelings were complicated. There was affection, certainly. There was admiration. There was even the thrill of being noticed again. But it was mixed with the quiet sadness of knowing she couldn't replace Greg. Couldn't go back to the days when life was simpler. Still, she couldn't deny the warmth that had returned to her heart. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of anticipation. A feeling that tomorrow could bring something new, something unexpected. The next day, Eli arrived with a small notebook. I've been thinking, he said, about a series on resilience people who faced loss and kept going. I thought maybe you could help me. I'd like to interview you if that's okay. Margaret looked at him, surprised. Interview me? Yes, he said. Not for anything published yet, just for my personal work. I want to capture your story, your strength, your perspective. Something in her stirred. She had been holding so much inside herself for so long, grief, regret, longing. Perhaps it was time to share some of it, even in small ways. All right, she said quietly. I'll do it. They spent the afternoon talking. She told him about Greg, about her teaching days, about the moments of joy and heartbreak that had shaped her. He listened, genuinely interested, asking questions that made her think deeply about her own life. It was strange, liberating, and comforting all at once. By the time he left, Margaret felt exhausted but exhilarated. She had spoken truths she hadn't admitted to anyone in years. And in return, she felt lighter, freer, more herself. Days turned into weeks. The sessions continued, each one bringing new insights, laughter, and quiet moments of reflection. Margaret realized that her connection with Eli wasn't about romance, it was about life, about being seen, about feeling human again. But even as she embraced this new chapter, there was a whisper of caution in her mind. Could it be appropriate for a young man to be so involved in her personal world? Was she putting herself in a position she didn't fully understand? She didn't have an answer. She only knew that each encounter left her feeling more alive than she had felt in years. Then came the day when Eli invited her to see a local exhibition. "I've been working on something special," he said. "I think you'll like it." Margaret hesitated, then agreed. She wanted to see the world through his eyes, to witness the way he captured life and emotion. The gallery was intimate, filled with photographs of people, places, and moments she recognized and had never noticed before. Among them were several portraits of Margaret herself captured in her garden, in her living room, laughing, thinking, alive. She felt tears prick her eyes. The photos were not flattering in the sense of hiding age or flaw. They were beautiful because they were real, honest, and alive. She had never seen herself this way. Eli smiled gently. "You see yourself differently through my lens. But it's not really about the lens. It's about what you've lived and what you still have to give." Margaret felt a rush of gratitude, affection, and something she didn't name. It was the thrill of life, of being noticed, of being part of a story larger than herself. And though she knew her heart still carried grief for Greg, she also realized that grief did not prevent joy from returning. That night, she walked through her garden under the silver light of the moon. Each flower seemed brighter, each leaf more vivid. She felt a quiet strength in herself, a sense that life could surprise her even now. Even at 50-9. And as she sipped her tea, she thought about Eli, about his energy, his respect, and his kindness. She understood that what she felt wasn't transgressive. It wasn't betrayal. It was life reminding her that she still existed, still mattered, still had stories to tell. Margaret knew that the journey ahead would be filled with choices, reflection, and perhaps even some awkward moments. But she was ready for it. Ready to live, ready to connect, ready to see herself with new eyes. Because sometimes the most profound relationships aren't about romance or desire. They're about being seen, being heard, and rediscovering your own worth through the eyes of another human being who truly cares. And for Margaret, Eli had become that mirror young man who reminded her that life, even after loss, still held color, light, and possibility.